Upon noticing the housekeeper's injury, the millionaire's son said something that shocked his own father. Richard Peterson was finishing reviewing the documents for the morning meeting when he heard the voice of his 8-year-old son echoing through the hallway of the mansion in Brentwood. The tone was different, filled with a seriousness that didn't match Tyler's age. That's when the boy appeared at the office door, holding the hand of Jasmine, the housekeeper who had been working in the house for only 3 months. The purple bruise around her left eye was even more visible under the light of the crystal chandelier. "Daddy," Jasmine said. She bumped into the corner of the table. "But I saw everything last night," said Tyler, with that determination only children have when they decide to speak the truth. Richard felt his stomach tighten. Jasmine tried to let go of the boy's hand, but he held on tighter. "Tyler, son, go play in your room," murmured Richard, unable to take his eyes off the injured face of the 26-year-old young woman. "No, Daddy. You need to know." Jasmine didn't bump into the table. It was the man from the house next door who did this to her. The silence that followed was deafening. Richard stood up slowly, his legs trembling in a way he couldn't control. "What are you saying, Tyler?" "I saw it from my bedroom window. Mr. Brandon, the neighbor, hit her in the face when she was coming back from the bakery early yesterday morning. She was crying a lot." Jasmine finally let go of the child's hand and covered her face with her hands. Her tears began to stream through her slender fingers. "Mr. Richard, I didn't want anyone to know," she whispered. Richard felt a wave of relief and guilt at the same time. Over the past few days, he had noticed Jasmine's distance, the way she avoided his gaze, how she lowered her head whenever he entered the room. A terrible part of his mind had started to imagine things, to wonder if his own wife, Amanda, who had been increasingly irritable and distant, might have done something unthinkable. "Why didn't you tell me?" asked Richard, approaching slowly. Jasmine wiped her eyes with the sleeve of her navy blue uniform. "Because, Mr. Brandon, he's your friend, Mr. Richard. You've known each other for years. You do business together." The revelation hit Richard like a punch to the stomach. Brandon Mitchell was indeed his partner in 2 real estate developments, a man he considered upright, a family man, married to Catherine for over 15 years. "Tyler, are you absolutely sure of what you saw?" The boy nodded, his brown eyes shining with held-back tears. "He was yelling at her, Daddy, calling her ugly names. Said she shouldn't be walking around there at that hour." Richard approached Jasmine, who instinctively stepped back. "I'm sorry, sir, I should have told you, but I'm afraid of him. And I also didn't want to cause problems for you." "What problems?" Jasmine hesitated, biting her lower lip. "Mr. Brandon said that if I told anyone, he would say I was trying to rob his house, that I was prowling around his garden at 6 in the morning for no reason." Richard felt anger growing in his chest. Brandon Mitchell had lived in the house next door for 8 years. He had always been cordial, always greeted everyone politely. How could someone like that be capable of assaulting a young, defenseless woman? Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now continuing. "Jasmine, where were you going at that hour?" "To the bakery, Mr. Richard. Mrs. Amanda had asked for fresh bread for your breakfast. I always go at 6 because that's when they take the bread out of the oven." Tyler approached her again. "Daddy, Jasmine was carrying the bakery bag when she came back. I saw everything from my window. Mr. Brandon was watering the plants, and when he saw her, he started yelling." Richard clenched his fists. The story made sense. Amanda had indeed mentioned wanting fresh bread every morning, and Jasmine always got up before 6 to prepare the family's breakfast. "What exactly did he say to you?" Jasmine wiped more tears. "He said I was one of those girls who hang around rich family houses looking for things to steal, that I had no business being there at that hour. When I tried to explain, he slapped me." Her voice faltered on the last words. "And then he said that if I told anyone, he would spread it around the whole neighborhood that I'm a thief, that no one would want to hire me anymore." Richard took a deep breath. Brandon had always shown a certain dislike for the neighborhood housekeepers. Sometimes he had made comments about those people who keep circulating on our streets, but Richard never imagined that this dislike could turn into physical aggression. "Tyler, Did you tell your mother about this? The boy shook his head. Mommy left early today for her Pilates class, but I couldn't stop thinking about Jasmine crying. That's why I came to talk to you. Richard looked at his son with a mixture of pride and worry. Tyler had always been a sensitive child, but showing such maturity at 8 years old was surprising. Jasmine, why didn't you say anything these past few days? I thought the injury would heal quickly and no one would notice, but it's getting worse instead of better. Richard looked at the bruise more closely. It really had a color that indicated it was recent, but the extent suggested it had been a strong blow. Did you see a doctor? No, Mr. Richard. I don't have health insurance and didn't want to spend money on that. But are you in pain? Jasmine nodded timidly. A little, especially when I chew. Richard felt guilt tighten his chest even more. Here was a hard-working, honest girl who woke up before 6 in the morning to make sure his family had fresh bread for breakfast, and she had been assaulted by a prejudiced neighbor, and he hadn't even noticed her suffering. Tyler, can you go to your room now? I need to talk to Jasmine alone. The boy hesitated. Are you going to help her, Daddy? Yes, son, you can trust me. Tyler nodded and left the office, but turned to Jasmine first. Aunt Jasmine, Daddy is a good person. He'll fix everything. When they were alone, Richard pointed to one of the leather armchairs for Jasmine to sit. Jasmine, first I want you to know that I completely believe your version. Tyler is an honest child, and your explanation makes perfect sense. She nodded, still wiping tears. Second, I will arrange a doctor for you today. And I don't want to hear any arguments about health insurance or money. Mr. Richard. And third, I will talk to Brandon today. Jasmine's face paled. Please, Mr. Richard, he'll know I told. He could cause more trouble for me. Jasmine, listen carefully to what I'm going to say. You won't have any more problems with Brandon Mitchell. I guarantee that. Richard stood up and began to pace around the office. His mind was working quickly, processing not only what had happened, but also the implications for his business with Brandon. Mr. Richard, you're not going to fire me because of this, are you? The question surprised him. Why would I do that? Because now I'm a problem. Mr. Brandon is your partner, and I'm just the housekeeper. Maybe it's easier to send me away and pretend nothing happened. Richard stopped pacing and looked at her intently. Jasmine, do you really think I'm that kind of person? She lowered her head. I don't know, Mr. Peterson. I've worked for wealthy people for 6 years and I've seen a lot. People like me. We always lose when there's conflict with important people. The painful honesty of that response struck Richard deeply. He realized that although Jasmine had been working in his home for 3 months, he knew very little about her life, her fears, her previous experiences. Jasmine, tell me a bit about these 6 years working for other families. She hesitated, clearly surprised by the question. Are you sure you want to know? I am. Jasmine took a deep breath. Well, I started working as a housekeeper when I was 20. My first employer was a very kind widow, Mrs. Eleanor. She treated me almost like a daughter, but when she passed away, her children let me go on the same day as the funeral. Richard nodded, encouraging her to continue. Then I went to work for a family right here in Brentwood. The employers were polite, but I discovered they would deduct from my salary whenever something went missing or broke in the house. Even when I proved it wasn't me, I stayed there almost 2 years and never received my full pay. And after that? After that, I worked for a couple of doctors. They were fairer with money, but... She hesitated. But what? The wife was jealous of me. She thought I was interested in her husband. She started making up that I wasn't doing the work properly, that I was going through their personal things. In the end, she accused me of stealing a gold bracelet. And had you stolen it? No, Mr. Peterson, never. The bracelet turned up later in a drawer in their bedroom, but she never apologized. She just said I could keep working. And you stayed. For a few more months, yes. I needed the money. But the situation became unbearable. She started treating me very badly in front of guests, as if I weren't a person. Richard felt a tightness in his chest. He had never stopped to think about how difficult and full of injustice a housekeeper's life could be. Was that why you were so afraid to tell me about Brandon? Yes, Mr. Peterson. In my experience, when there's a conflict between a housekeeper and someone important, the housekeeper always loses, even when she's in the right. Richard sat in the armchair next to hers. Jasmine, I'm going to make you a promise, and I want you to believe me, even if your past experiences say otherwise. She looked at him expectantly. You will not lose your job because of this. You will not be harmed in any way, and Brandon Mitchell will pay for what he did. But he's your partner. So what? He assaulted a person under my care. He threatened someone I consider part of my family. Jasmine's eyes widened. Part of the family. Richard realized he had said it without thinking, but upon reflection he saw it was true. Over the last 3 months, Jasmine had become more than just an employee. Tyler talked with her about school. Amanda commented on the delicious dishes she prepared, and he himself had noticed how the house seemed more welcoming since she arrived. Yes, Jasmine, part of the family, and no one mistreats someone in my family without consequences. At that moment, they heard the front door open. It was Amanda returning from her Pilates class. "Richard, where are you?" she shouted from the entry hall. "In the office," replied Richard. Amanda appeared in the doorway a few seconds later, still wearing her workout clothes. She immediately noticed Jasmine's injury. "My goodness, Jasmine, what happened to your face?" Richard and Jasmine exchanged a look. It was time for Amanda to know everything. "Amanda, sit down here. We need to talk about something serious." Amanda sat in the third armchair, her expression shifting from curiosity to concern. Richard told the whole story, from Tyler's observation to the conversation he had just had with Jasmine about her past experiences. Amanda listened silently, her expression growing increasingly outraged. "Brandon did that?" she asked when Richard finished. "Yes, Mrs. Amanda," confirmed Jasmine. "Tyler saw everything." Amanda stood up abruptly. "Where is Tyler?" "In his room. I'm going to speak with him." Amanda left the office with determined steps. Richard and Jasmine waited, listening to the sound of voices coming from the upper floor. 15 minutes later, Amanda returned with Tyler by her side. "Tell Mommy exactly what you saw," said Amanda, sitting down again. Tyler repeated the whole story, this time with even more detail. He described the clothes Brandon was wearing, the exact time everything happened, even the words he managed to hear from his bedroom window. He called her a tramp, Mommy, and said she must have been looking for a house to rob. Amanda clenched her fists. "Richard, I want you to call Brandon right now." "Amanda, I was thinking of going there." "No, call him and ask him to come here. I want to look him in the face when you confront him about this." Richard hesitated. He had known Amanda for 12 years of marriage, and when she got into that state of cold determination, it was better not to contradict her. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like the video and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out now continuing. All right, but Jasmine doesn't need to be present during this conversation. "Actually, Mr. Richard, I would like to stay," said Jasmine, surprising everyone. "I'm tired of staying quiet when people mistreat me. If you allow it, I want to hear what he has to say." Amanda smiled for the first time since she had arrived. "Perfect. Call him, Richard." Richard picked up the phone and dialed Brandon's number. The phone rang several times before he answered. "Richard, what a surprise. How are you, my friend?" "Hi, Brandon. I'm fine. Listen, can you come over to my house? I need to talk to you about something urgent." There was a small pause. "Now? Is everything all right?" "I'd rather talk in person. It's about the business we have together." "Oh, of course. I'm free. I'll be there in 5 minutes." Richard hung up the phone. "He's on his way." Amanda turned to Tyler. "Son, you're going to stay in your room during this conversation, okay? But Mommy? No discussion. This is adult talk." Tyler left the office, visibly upset. Richard used the minutes of waiting to brief Jasmine on how the conversation would work. "Jasmine, I'm going to let him speak first. I'm going to say I heard there was an incident between the two of you, but I won't give details on how I found out. I want to see what version he tells, and if he lies, then I reveal that Tyler saw everything." Amanda nodded, approving the strategy. "And Jasmine, If he tries to intimidate you in any way, you let me deal with him." 5 minutes later, the doorbell rang. Richard went to answer it himself. Brandon Mitchell was at the door with a wide smile, wearing a light blue polo shirt and khaki pants. At 42, he was a tall, strong man, always well-groomed. His friendly appearance totally contrasted with the image of the aggressor that Richard now had of him. "Hey, Richard, what's this urgency about our business?" Richard led him to the office without answering. "Hi, Amanda. How are you?" Marcos greeted as he entered. "I'm fine, Brandon," Amanda replied coldly. It was then that Brandon noticed Jasmine sitting in the armchair. His smile faltered for a fraction of a second, but he quickly recomposed himself. "Good afternoon," he said to Jasmine, who merely nodded her head. Richard closed the door and returned to his chair behind the desk. "Brandon, have a seat. I need to ask you something." Brandon sat in the remaining armchair, clearly intrigued by Jasmine's presence at the meeting. "Was there any incident between you and Jasmine this week?" Brandon's face changed subtly. The smile disappeared, but he maintained an expression of curiosity. "Incident? What kind of incident?" "You tell me." Brandon looked at Jasmine, then at Amanda, and finally back at Richard. "Richard, I don't know what you're talking about. What kind of accusation is being made here?" Richard noticed that Brandon hadn't directly denied it. He was responding with other questions. "Brandon, I'm going to ask you very clearly. Did you have any kind of confrontation with Jasmine in the past few days?" "Confrontation?" Brandon forced a laugh. "Richard, why would I have a confrontation with your housekeeper?" Again, an evasive answer. "So you're denying that there was any interaction between you?" Brandon hesitated for a few seconds. Richard realized he was calculating his response. "Look, Richard, there might have been some misunderstanding." "What kind of misunderstanding?" "Well, I was watering my plants early yesterday morning and I saw her passing by my house several times. I thought it was strange because it was very early, so I asked if she was looking for something." Richard leaned forward. "And then?" "And then she got very nervous, started stuttering, gave confusing answers. I thought the behavior was suspicious." Amanda intervened for the first time. "Suspicious how, Brandon?" "Well, Amanda, you know how it is. Sometimes these people," he gestured vaguely in Jasmine's direction, "they hang around houses, checking when families leave, things like that." Richard felt his anger growing. "These people?" "You know what I mean, Richard. We have to be careful. This neighborhood is full of strange people circulating." "Brandon, Jasmine isn't a strange person. She's been working here in my house for 3 months." "Oh, really?" Brandon seemed genuinely surprised. "I didn't know. I thought she was someone who was just wandering around without a reason." Richard looked at Jasmine, who kept her eyes fixed on the floor. "Even so, Brandon, what right do you have to approach anyone on the street?" "Richard, I just asked a polite question." "Brandon," Amanda interjected again, "you're lying." The businessman turned to her, clearly offended. "Excuse me? You didn't just ask a polite question, you assaulted Jasmine." Brandon's face turned red. "That's a very serious accusation, Amanda. I hope you have proof of this." Richard stood up. "We do, Brandon. We have an eyewitness." "Eyewitness?" Brandon forced another laugh. "Who? Herself?" He pointed at Jasmine. "No. My 8-year-old son saw everything from his bedroom window." The silence that followed was heavy. Brandon visibly paled. "Richard, this is a misunderstanding. Tyler saw you yelling at her, cursing at her, and hitting her in the face." "I didn't hit her, it was a light push." Richard and Amanda exchanged glances. Brandon had just incriminated himself. "So you admit you had physical contact with her?" Brandon realized the mistake he had made. "Richard, let me explain better." "You don't need to explain anything, Brandon. You assaulted a defenseless woman. You threatened her so she wouldn't tell what happened, and on top of that, you did it based on pure prejudice." "Prejudice? What prejudice?" "You said it yourself, these people. You attacked her because she's poor, because she's a housekeeper." Brandon stood up abruptly. "Richard, you're misinterpreting everything. I was defending our neighborhood, the safety of our families." "Defending from what?" "From a 26-year-old girl going to buy bread." I didn't know she was going to buy bread, but you should have asked before resorting to aggression. Brandon Mitchell began pacing around the office, visibly nervous. All right. I admit I went too far, but you have to understand my side. Crime is increasing. We need to stay alert. Brandon, said Amanda coldly, you hit a woman in the face. You left her with a bruise. There's no justification for that. It was an accident. I just wanted her to get away from my house. Richard Peterson sat back down. Brandon, you're digging yourself into a deeper hole. First you denied everything. Then you admitted to a misunderstanding. Now you're talking about a light push. Next thing you'll admit is that you slapped her. Brandon stopped walking and looked directly at Jasmine for the first time since the conversation began. Miss, I'm sorry, all right? I really went too far. It was a moment of nervousness. Jasmine slowly raised her eyes. Nervousness doesn't justify you calling me a tramp and hitting me in the face. I didn't call you a tramp. Yes, you did. And you also said I was looking for houses to rob. Brandon opened his mouth but couldn't respond. Amanda stood up. Brandon, I think it's better if you leave. Amanda, please. Richard, we can resolve this between friends. I can compensate her somehow. Compensate? Richard stood up again. How do you compensate for psychological trauma, Brandon? Richard, don't exaggerate. It was just a slap. Just a slap. To a woman who was coming back from the bakery with bread for our family? Brandon realized he had completely lost control of the situation. Look, Richard, I'll be honest with you. I was nervous because there were some robberies in the neighborhood last week. When I saw her passing by multiple times at the same hour, I lost it. How many times did she pass by your house? Twice. Twice. Once going, once coming back from the bakery. But I didn't know that. Brandon, you've lived here for 8 years. Haven't you ever noticed that the neighborhood housekeepers do their shopping early in the morning? Brandon didn't respond. Richard continued. You assaulted her out of prejudice, period. If it had been Amanda passing by your house twice, would you have hit her? Of course not. But Amanda is what? Brandon realized he was about to fall into another verbal trap. Richard, I already apologized. What more do you want? We want you to understand the seriousness of what you did, said Amanda, and to take measures to ensure this never happens again. What measures? Richard approached him. First, you'll pay all of Jasmine's medical expenses. Second, you'll seek her out personally and apologize properly. Third, you'll take an anger management course. Richard, that's excessive. And fourth, Richard continued, you'll reconsider our partnership in business. Brandon's face turned pale. What do you mean? I can't continue doing business with someone who assaults innocent women. Richard, please, don't mix things up. One thing is my personal life, another is our business. No, Brandon. Character isn't separate. If you're capable of hitting a woman out of prejudice, what assurance do I have that you'll be honest in business? Brandon approached Richard, almost pleading. Richard, please think it over. We have 2 developments underway. If you pull out, it'll ruin both of us. Maybe, but I'd rather lose money than make money with someone who has no character. Amanda smiled proudly at her husband. Brandon turned to Jasmine one last time. Miss, what can I do for you to forgive me? Jasmine looked him in the eyes for the first time during the entire conversation. You can treat people with respect, regardless of how much money they have in the bank. The simplicity and dignity of her response left everyone silent for a few seconds. Brandon nodded slowly. You're right. I need to rethink some things. Richard opened the office door. Brandon, when you've rethought those things and are ready for real change, we'll talk about our business. Until then, I prefer to keep my distance. Brandon left the office with his head down. Richard walked him to the front door. Richard, I'm truly sorry. I know, Brandon, but being sorry isn't enough. You need to change. After Brandon left, Richard returned to the office where Amanda and Jasmine were still talking. How are you feeling? He asked Jasmine. Better, Mr. Richard, much better. Thank you for believing in me. Jasmine, you never need to thank me for believing the truth. That's my obligation as a human being. Amanda stood up. Well, now let's take care of that injury. I'll call Dr. Michael and ask him to come here to the house. Mrs. Amanda, you don't need to call a doctor to the house. That must be very expensive. Jasmine, said Amanda firmly, you're part of our family, and families take care of each other. Later that day, after the doctor examined Jasmine and confirmed there were no fractures, just a bruise that would fade in a few days, the family gathered for dinner. Tyler was particularly excited. Daddy, did I do the right thing by telling what I saw? Yes, son, you were very brave. Aunt Jasmine won't be sad anymore. Jasmine smiled at the boy. I won't be sad anymore, Tyler. Thanks to you. Amanda served the dinner that Jasmine had prepared, but insisted she sit at the table with the family. Mrs. Amanda, I can't eat at your table. Of course you can. Today is a special day. Today our family became closer. During dinner, Richard reflected on the day's events. He realized that situation had changed something fundamental in the household dynamics. It was no longer just an employer-employee relationship. It was, in fact, a family. Jasmine, you mentioned this morning that you've worked as a housekeeper for 6 years. Have you always wanted to work in this field? Jasmine hesitated, clearly not expecting the question. Actually, no, Mr. Richard. I took a technical nursing course. It was my dream to work in a hospital. And why don't you work there? Because to get a job in a hospital, you need experience. And to get experience, you need to get a job. It's a closed circle. Amanda became interested in the conversation. Do you still have your course certificate? Yes, Mrs. Amanda. In fact, that's why I knew how to care for your Tyler when he had a fever last month. Richard remembered the episode. Tyler had had a high fever one night, and Jasmine had shown medical knowledge by guiding them on how to reduce the temperature and when it would be necessary to go to a hospital. Jasmine, have you ever thought about trying to get a job in healthcare again? Oh, Mr. Richard, that's a distant dream. I don't have money to keep looking for jobs, paying for transportation to interviews that lead nowhere. Richard and Amanda exchanged glances. Both had the same idea at the same time. Jasmine, Amanda has a friend who works in the administration at Riverside Memorial Hospital. Would you like me to ask her to help you get an opportunity? Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now continuing. Jasmine's eyes filled with tears again, but this time they were tears of joy. You would do that for me? Jasmine, after what you went through today, after how you remained strong and dignified in the face of adversity, I'm certain you'll be an excellent healthcare professional. Tyler, who had been following the conversation, clapped his hands. So how wonderful. Aunt Jasmine is going to work at the hospital. Take it easy, Tyler, said Amanda. First she needs to get the position, but I'm sure everything will work out. Jasmine wiped away her tears. I don't know what to say. You barely know me and you're willing to help me so much. Jasmine, said Richard, we've known you for 3 months. That's long enough to know that you're an honest, hard-working, caring person. That's all we need to know. But if I get a job at the hospital, I'll have to leave you. Who will take care of the house? Amanda smiled. We'll manage, Jasmine. The important thing is for you to achieve your dream. But can I still come here sometimes? To visit you? Tyler answered before his parents. Of course you can. You'll always be part of our family. That night, after Jasmine went to her room in the annex of the house, Richard and Amanda talked in their bedroom. Do you think we did the right thing today? Asked Richard. With Brandon or with Jasmine? With both. Amanda moved closer to him. Richard, I've never felt so proud of you as I did today. Seeing you stand up for Jasmine, risking your business relationship. That shows who you really are. But we could lose a lot of money without the partnership with Brandon. So what? Money we can earn back. Dignity and character, once lost, are very hard to regain. Richard hugged his wife. Do you think Jasmine will get the job at the hospital? If it depends on her skills, yes. If it depends on our connections, too. I'll call Jennifer first thing tomorrow morning. And if she gets it and leaves? Amanda pulled back a little to look into her husband's eyes. Richard, you've grown attached to Jasmine, haven't you? Richard thought before answering. Yes, and not just me. Tyler, too. And you, too. That's true. But if we truly care about someone, we want what's best for that person, right? You're right. Besides, who says she'll disappear from our lives? Nurses need time off, too. The next morning, Amanda called her friend Jennifer, who worked in the administration of Riverside Memorial Hospital, one of the leading private hospitals in the city. "Jennifer, it's Amanda. How are you? Listen, I have a very special favor to ask you." Amanda told a brief version of Jasmine's story, emphasizing her nursing education and practical experience. "She sounds perfect for our team," said Jennifer. "Have her come by here tomorrow at 9 in the morning. I'll introduce her to the nursing coordinator." When Amanda gave the news to Jasmine, the young woman began to cry with emotion. "Mrs. Amanda, I can't believe this is really happening." "Yes, you can, and you'll do very well in the interview. But I don't have proper clothes for a job interview." Amanda smiled. "Leave it to me. We're the same size." That same day, Amanda took Jasmine to a shopping mall and bought her a complete professional outfit, including shoes and a purse. "Mrs. Amanda, all of this must have cost a fortune." "Jasmine, consider this an investment in your future. When you're earning well as a nurse, you can pay me back if you want." "I will pay you back, with interest." "No interest. Between friends, we don't charge interest." The night before the interview, Jasmine was visibly nervous. During dinner, she could barely eat. "Aunt Jasmine, are you scared?" asked Tyler. "A little bit, Tyler." "But why? You're really good at taking care of people. When I had a fever, you knew exactly what to do." "Thank you, Tyler. That makes me feel more confident." Richard joined the conversation. "Jasmine, do you want me to take you to the hospital tomorrow?" "You don't have to, Mr. Richard. I'll just take the bus." "Jasmine, don't be silly. Of course I'm taking you. It's the least I can do. But won't you be late for work?" "Work can wait. This is more important." The next morning, Richard dropped Jasmine off at the entrance of Riverside Memorial Hospital. "Jasmine, remember what we talked about. Just be yourself. Your competence and your character will speak for you." "Thank you, Mr. Richard, for everything. Good luck. I'll be rooting for you." 3 hours later, Richard received a phone call. "Mr. Richard, it's Jasmine." "So? How did it go?" "I got it. They offered me a position in the pediatric ward." Richard smiled so broadly that his colleagues in the office looked at him with curiosity. "Jasmine, that's wonderful. Congratulations." "Thank you, Mr. Richard. I wouldn't have managed this without your help." "When do you start?" "Next Monday. But, Mr. Richard, can I ask for one more favor?" "Of course. Can I keep working there at your house on weekends until you find someone else? I don't want to leave you all high and dry." Richard was touched by her consideration. "Jasmine, you can stay as long as you want, but I have a better proposal." "What proposal?" "How about you continue living here with us? You pay a small amount of rent for the room, and in return you can use all the amenities of the house. It would be cheaper than renting an apartment, and you'd be close to family." There were a few seconds of silence on the line. "Are you serious?" "Completely. Talk to Amanda when you get home. I'm sure she'll approve of the idea." "Mr. Richard, I'll never be able to repay such kindness." "Jasmine, you already have. You taught us the value of dignity, courage, honesty. That is priceless." When Richard got home that night, he found the house celebrating. Amanda had prepared a special dinner to celebrate Jasmine's new job. Tyler had drawn a picture of Aunt Jasmine dressed as a nurse to give to her as a gift. "Daddy, look at the drawing I made." Richard examined the drawing. It was touching to see how Tyler had portrayed Jasmine, smiling with a red cross on her chest, surrounded by small children. "It's beautiful, son. She's going to be very moved." During dinner, Jasmine shared all the details of the interview. The coordinator said they were looking for someone exactly with my profile, a person with technical training, but especially with the sensitivity to work with children. "And how did she know you have the sensitivity to work with children?" asked Amanda. "I told her about Tyler, about how I learned to take care of him these past 3 months. She was impressed when I said that you trusted me to care for your son." Richard smiled. "Tyler was your professional reference." "Yes, he was, and it was the best reference I could have." 2 weeks later, Jasmine was completely settled into her new routine. She worked at the hospital from Monday to Friday, and on weekends she helped Amanda with some household chores. more for pleasure than out of obligation. Tyler was delighted to have an aunt nurse living at home. "Aunt Jasmine, can you teach me how to take blood pressure?" "I sure can, Tyler. But first you need to grow up a little bit more." Richard watched the harmony of the new family set up with satisfaction. Jasmine's presence had brought a dimension of care and affection that he hadn't realized was missing. One day during dinner, Jasmine shared some unexpected news. "Everyone, I need to tell you something." They all stopped eating and paid attention. "What is it?" asked Amanda. "Brandon showed up at the hospital today." Richard tensed up. "Brandon? What did he want?" "He said he'd been looking for me for 2 weeks. He wanted to apologize in person." "And how did he know where you work?" "He asked his wife, Catherine. It seems she spoke with Mrs. Amanda at the shopping mall." Amanda remembered. "Oh, that's right. She asked me how you were doing, and I mentioned that you had gotten a job at the hospital." "And what did he say?" asked Richard. "He apologized, said he was in therapy to control his anger, and he gave me this." Jasmine took an envelope out of her pocket. "What is it?" "Money to cover all the medical expenses I had, plus an additional amount as compensation." Richard took the envelope and handed it back to Jasmine without opening it. "This is yours. You decide whether to accept it or not. I accepted the money for the medical expenses, but the rest I said I didn't want." "Why?" "Because money can't buy dignity, and I don't want him to think that by buying me off he's free to do the same thing to someone else." Amanda applauded. "Perfect, Jasmine. You did exactly the right thing." "But there's one good thing," continued Jasmine. "He said he was thinking about starting a social project in the neighborhood, something to improve the relationship between the residents and the workers who provide services here." Richard became interested. "What kind of project?" "He didn't give details, but he said he wanted to talk to you about it. Said he was very sorry about the end of your partnership." Richard became thoughtful. "What do you think? Should I talk to him?" Amanda answered first. "If he really has changed, if he's really in therapy and wants to create something positive, maybe it's worth at least listening." "Jasmine?" "I think people deserve a second chance, Mr. Richard, as long as they've shown they've really changed." Tyler, who had been following the whole conversation, gave his opinion too. "Daddy, you always teach me to forgive when I make mistakes. Maybe Mr. Brandon can learn to be a better person." The wisdom of his 8-year-old son surprised Richard. "You're right, son. I'll talk to him next week." A week later, Brandon showed up at Richard's house. This time, his posture was completely different. He was more humble, less expansive. "Richard, thank you for agreeing to talk to me." "Have a seat, Brandon. What did you want to talk about?" "First, I want you to know that I started therapy. Twice a week." "That's good." "Second, I want to apologize again, not only for what I did to Jasmine, but for the way I reacted when you confronted me." Richard nodded, indicating he was listening. "Third, I want to propose something to you." "I'm listening." "I want to create a social project here in the neighborhood, something that brings the residents closer to the workers who provide services here, to prevent other Brandons from making the same mistakes I made." "What kind of project?" "I was thinking about lectures on labor rights, on respecting social differences, on how to create a healthy work environment for housekeepers, gardeners, doormen." Richard was surprised by the idea. "That's interesting. Go on." "I also thought about creating a kind of opportunity center, a place where housekeepers like Jasmine could find information about courses, jobs in their field of training, that sort of thing." "And where do you want to implement this?" "At the neighborhood club. I've already spoken with the board. They agreed to provide a space on Saturday mornings." Richard was impressed with the level of planning. "Brandon, this seems like an excellent idea, but why do you want me to participate?" "Because I need someone people respect to give credibility to the project, and because I need your approval to feel truly forgiven for what I did." Richard reflected for a few minutes. "Brandon, I will participate in the project, but on one condition." "What?" "Jasmine has to be a consultant on the project. She will guide you on what is really useful for domestic workers." Brandon smiled. "Perfect idea. Do you think she would accept?" Let's ask her. When Richard told Jasmine about Brandon's project, she became thoughtful. What do you think? Asked Richard. I think it could be very useful. There are many housekeepers who go through the same problems I went through. If we can help some of them, so you accept participating? I accept, but with one condition. What? The project can't be just for housekeepers. It has to include other workers too. Gardeners, doormen, day cleaners, painters. Why? Because the prejudice isn't just against housekeepers. It's against all of us who provide services for people who have more money. Richard was impressed once again by Jasmine's wisdom. Perfect observation. I'll talk to Brandon. The Respectful Coexistence project was launched 3 months later. Every Saturday morning, the neighborhood club welcomed domestic workers and residents for lectures, workshops, and a space for dialogue. Jasmine had become the volunteer coordinator of the project, balancing this role with her work at the hospital. The success was immediate. In no time, stories similar to Jasmine's began to appear and be resolved through dialogue and education. Richard watched everything with a satisfaction that went beyond the professional. He saw a situation of conflict and injustice turn into something positive for the entire community. During one of the lectures, Jasmine was invited to tell her own story. Richard, Amanda, and Tyler were in the audience to support her. My name is Jasmine, she began, and 6 months ago, I was just another invisible housekeeper. Invisible until the day someone decided to attack me out of prejudice. The audience listened attentively as she narrated the events that led to that transformation. But the most important thing wasn't what happened to me. The most important thing was the reaction of the people around me. I discovered that there are people who are capable of putting justice above their own interests. Richard felt his eyes well up. I discovered that a family isn't defined by blood or documents. A family is defined by love, respect, and mutual care. Tyler whispered to his father. She's talking about us, Dad. Yes, she is, son. Today I work as a pediatric nurse, continued Jasmine. But I will never forget where I came from. And more importantly, I will never forget that my transformation was only possible because good people decided to extend a hand to me. When she finished speaking, she received a standing ovation. Richard had never felt so proud of someone. After the lecture, as people dispersed, Brandon approached Richard. Richard, I want to thank you. For what? For giving me the opportunity to redeem myself, for not giving up on me. Richard put his hand on Brandon's shoulder. Brandon, we all deserve a second chance. What matters is what we do with it. Do you think one day we can do business together again? Richard looked at Jasmine, who was talking animatedly with some women from the audience. Brandon, I think we're already doing the most important business of our lives. How so? The business of building a better world. 6 months after the start of the Respectful Coexistence project, Richard received an unexpected call. Mr. Richard, this is Rebecca from the local newspaper. We would like to do a story about your project. A story? Yes, we received several letters from readers praising the initiative. It seems the project is becoming a model for other neighborhoods in the city. Richard was surprised. A model? Yes. We already have 3 neighborhoods wanting to implement similar projects. Would you be willing to give an interview? Richard spoke with Jasmine and Brandon, and everyone agreed to participate in the story. On the day of the interview, the journalist asked a question Richard didn't expect. Mr. Peterson, what was the most important lesson you learned from this whole experience? Richard thought for a few seconds before answering. I learned that justice isn't some abstract thing that happens in courtrooms. Justice is something concrete that we practice every day in the small decisions we make. Could you explain that further? When my son saw an injustice happening and decided to speak up, he practiced justice. When I decided to believe Jasmine's version of events, I practiced justice. When Brandon decided to take responsibility for his mistakes and work to fix them, he practiced justice. The journalist turned to Jasmine. And you, Jasmine, what was your most important lesson? I learned that dignity isn't something people can take away from you. It's something you carry inside your heart, no matter how others treat you. Finally, she asked Brandon, "And you, Mr. Mitchell, what changed in your life?" "I learned that privilege comes with responsibility. If you have more money, more influence, more power, you have an obligation to use those things to protect those who have less, not to oppress them." The story was published on the front page of the local newspaper with the headline, "From Injustice to Transformation: How a Domestic Conflict Became a Social Movement." The impact went beyond anything any of them had imagined. Richard began receiving invitations to speak about the project in other towns. Jasmine was invited to participate in a television program about housekeepers' rights. Brandon became a reference in corporate social responsibility. But for Richard, the most rewarding moment came on an ordinary evening during family dinner. "Daddy," said Tyler, then 9 years old, "can I ask you a question?" "Of course, son." "Do you regret fighting with Mr. Mitchell because of Aunt Jasmine?" Richard looked at Jasmine, who was smiling from across the table, and then at Amanda, who nodded encouragingly. "Tyler, that was one of the best decisions I've ever made in my life." "Why?" "Because we discovered that doing the right thing is worth more than any amount of money, and mostly because we gained a bigger family." Tyler smiled. "Daddy, when I grow up, I want to be just like you." "What do you mean?" "I want to be the kind of person who stands up for those who need help." Richard felt his heart overflowing with pride. "Son, you already are that kind of person. You were the one who started this whole story when you decided to tell the truth." That night, after everyone had gone to sleep, Richard stayed alone on the porch watching the lights of the neighborhood where it had all begun. He thought about how a situation that could have been just another case of social injustice had turned into something so much bigger. He thought about Tyler's courage, Jasmine's dignity, Brandon's capacity for change, Amanda's unconditional support. He thought about how the truth, no matter how painful it is in the moment, always leads to better results than omission or lies. But most of all, he thought about how every person has the power to choose between perpetuating the cycle of injustice or breaking it. He had chosen to break the cycle, and that had changed not only his own life, but the lives of all the people around him. In the next room, Jasmine was finishing up studying for a specialization in pediatric nursing that she had gotten through a scholarship. She too was reflecting on the past few months. From an invisible, intimidated housekeeper, she had become a nurse, a social consultant, and a reference on labor rights. But what moved her the most wasn't the professional success. It was the fact that she had found a family that saw her as a person, not as an employee. In the other room, Tyler was drawing in his notebook. He was drawing a picture of the complete family: Daddy Richard, Mommy Amanda, Aunt Jasmine, and himself, all holding hands. At the bottom of the drawing, he wrote in his still childish handwriting, "My family that stands up for what's right." And in a house a few blocks away, Brandon was finishing up a presentation about the Respectful Coexistence project for a social responsibility conference. He had become a completely different person in recent months. Therapy had helped him understand that his aggressiveness came from deep insecurities and ingrained prejudices he didn't even know he had. The social project wasn't just a way to redeem himself. It was his new passion, his way of contributing to a fairer world. And it had all started with an 8-year-old child who decided to speak the truth about something he considered unfair. The following weeks brought new developments. The Respectful Coexistence project expanded to 17 neighborhoods in the city, and Jasmine was invited to coordinate the regional implementation. Richard decided to create a social enterprise focused on social responsibility projects, with Brandon as a partner, this time in a partnership based on solid values. Amanda began offering financial education classes for housekeepers, helping them plan their careers and investments. And Tyler, at 9 years old, became the star of the project's talks, telling his version of the story and inspiring other children to speak up when they saw injustices. 1 year after the initial incident, the family organized a special dinner to celebrate all the transformations. Present were Richard, Amanda, Tyler, Jasmine, Brandon, and his wife Catherine, as well as several other people who had benefited from the project throughout the year. During dinner, Richard stood up to make a toast. "I want to toast to a discovery we made this year. We discovered that family isn't just who lives in the same house or has the same last name. Family is who we choose to share our life, our values, our dreams with. Everyone raised their glasses. We discovered that doing the right thing isn't always easy, but it's always worth it. We discovered that an 8-year-old can change the world when he decides to speak the truth. Tyler blushed with happiness. And we discovered that the best transformations happen when we choose love over fear, justice over convenience, truth over silence. There was applause around the table. That's why I want to toast to our expanded family, to our new friendships, and especially to the courage to be better than we were yesterday. Cheers, everyone said in unison. After dinner, while people chatted in the living room, Jasmine approached Richard in the kitchen. "Mr. Richard, may I speak with you for a minute?" "Of course, what is it?" "I want to thank you, not only for defending me that day, but for giving me the opportunity to discover who I can really be. Jasmine, you don't have to thank me. You earned all this through your own merit. But I wouldn't have had the chance if you hadn't believed in me." Richard smiled. "Jasmine, can I tell you something? You taught me as much as I taught you. You showed me what true dignity is, what real strength is, what character is." "Really?" "Really. When you looked Brandon in the eye and told him he should treat people with respect, regardless of how much money they have in the bank. In that moment, you taught me more about leadership than any business book." Jasmine was moved. "Thank you, Mr. Richard, for everything, for changing my life. Thank you, Jasmine, for changing ours." End of story. Dear listeners, what did you think of this story of transformation and justice? Tell us in the comments if you have witnessed similar situations and how you reacted. Leave your like if the story moved you, and most importantly, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss other stories that show how small acts of courage can change everything. Until next time.